Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to the Grand Finals of the Esports World Cup. What I've got for you today is a best of 9 series for the lion's share of $700,000, but maybe more importantly, also the title of World Champion of StarCraft 2. Now what I've got for you today is a Zerg versus Protoss, where we're starting off on the map Persephone, spawning right here in the top left, playing with the red Zerg drones. We have a 2-time World Champion of StarCraft 2, and he goes by the name of Serral. His opponent down in the bottom left, playing with the blue Protoss pieces. He's from South Korea, and he goes by the name of Classic. Now, real quick, sadly for me, I already know who ends up winning this particular match, because I was there. I was one of the commentators for the EWC. I did not cast the Grand Finals, however. I, well, obviously kind of followed along with all of the games that were being played while I was not casting myself. But I figured it is still going to be an absolute blast to go ahead and have a look at exactly what ended up going down between these two players. Because truth be told, after a week of casting, I was pretty tired, and by the time the finals were being played, I was zoning out some of the time. I actually traveled home 2 days ago as of me casting this, and didn't really do a whole lot yesterday. And now we're back. Luckily for me, though, they already released the replay pack. So if you're interested in checking out some of the replays, maybe in depth yourself as well, I did retweet it, so you can go ahead and have a look over on my my Twitter, my X. Don't look at my X. Look at my Twitter. It's at LowkoTV. I don't know if my X is on. Anyways, guys, it's time for a best of 9. So this is an absolute banger of a series, right? So there's a lot of history between these two. First off, they've played against each other a bunch of times over the last few months. Serral obviously has been good at the game since like 2018 or so. Classic has been playing this game since the absolute earliest days that I can remember. So probably since about like 2010 or so. These guys are absolute legends. Now, over the last few months, they've played against each other a few times. There was this famous series that Classic ended up winning, which is pretty unheard of, especially against somebody like Serral, who is known for his Zerg versus Protoss. Serral really doesn't lose a ZVP. However, during this particular event, so during the EWC, they had already played against each other before in a best of 5. Now, I don't really want to spoil that particular one, but it is important to note that just a few days prior to this particular series, they did play against each other. I'll probably actually cast that series as well on the YouTubes, so make sure you subscribe so you get notified as soon as that video goes live. But either way, there is a little bit of history, and because of that, I can imagine, without like spoiling all too much, that Classic is not too happy playing late game. So in that series they played a few months ago, they played late game against each other a few times, and it was honestly a sight to behold. Problem is, Serral has gotten better since then. And in that previous series, it became pretty apparent pretty fast that Serral's late game is absolutely monstrous right now. Even though a lot of the top-level Zergs are struggling playing Zerg versus Protoss late game right now, Serral is still somebody that can somehow, some way figure it out. They had that phenomenal game, you may remember it, where it came down to like a single Brute Lord and a single Archon. Now, who wins in the one-on-one fight between a Brute Lord and an Archon? It turns out that it was it was the Archon in the end, but that was an absolute insane game of StarCraft, and I can imagine that Classic was pretty happy with the results of that particular one. Now, this is, of course, a very important match, not only just for the World Championship, but like I said, also for what is, in many pro gamers' lives, like literally life-changing amounts of money. Both of these guys, though, have been very successful. I think Serral is currently sitting at, like, nearly $2 million in tournament earnings over the course of his career. So, you know, Classic not quite at that level, but neither of these two players will be struggling in that department, or at least they shouldn't be. But it is still going to add a lot of additional stress. Classic, though, mixing it up. So far he's gone for the Adepts, he's gone for the 3rd Nexus, but he's now also going for a 2nd Starport, or a 2nd Stargate. This is honestly kind of a nutty thing to go for early on, right? So we've seen this quite a bit in this particular matchup, as we now have one of the queens getting hit. I don't know if there's enough, though. Okay, yeah, I was going to say, it's a little dangerous. Oracle swoops Benny. Okay, he does end up getting the kill right there on the very first queen, but you do have to be extremely careful. What we have seen on this map in the past is a quick fleet beacon. Especially players like, for example, Hero are very fond of it. Because of the way that the main bases are laid out on Persephone, you can fight bottom left to top left pretty easily, and the distance air to air is really not that big. So if you go for like a Tempest rush, you use the long-ranged weapons of the Tempest to your advantage, you can get it, well, into the opponent's main base pretty early on. Classic, though, is going for a bit of a different approach. Double Stargate Oracle. I don't even remember the last time I've seen this. It used to be quite good for a while. Basically, the idea is that even though these units don't have a lot of HP, and they don't have a ton of sustain, they can kill stuff really fast. My main concern, though, is that on this map, Tempest builds are very popular, and therefore Serral is already going into Aspire. He hasn't really seen all too much, but I mean, we have seen quick Tempest rushes as now suddenly the Oracles swoop in. I would imagine we're going to be seeing more on the production tab too. Maybe we're really just trying to rush out 4 of them. The Void Ray itself decides to try and target fire down one of the spores, but this is a little bit indecisive by Classic. Honestly, if this was like the grand reveal, I mean, sure, the damage has been effective so far, but it does feel a little bit lackluster. Serral has gone for the 4th hatchery already. That one's entirely uncontested. And obviously, with the way that this matchup goes, usually you do have to do something as a Protoss player to try and slow down the Zerg. Now, he has also slowed himself down a little bit by going for the 2nd Stargate and the additional production. And at this point, the Oracles apparently are not going to be getting any additional friends, as the Stargates are now idle. Okay, so Templar Archives on the back of this. This is, of course, a signature play here from Serral. He is looking like, well, himself again. There was a moment where he looked a little bit more mortal earlier this year, but the scouting that Serral goes for is always ridiculous. He seems to be able to make the right call almost all of the time. And I believe the Spire, it was originally built to counter Tempests if there would be, well, a bunch of them flying around the map. I think we would go Corruptors against that. Serral, though, is now using the Spire to go for Mutalisks. I don't think Classic knows, and this is a problem. Has he seen the Spire? He has not. So the Spire is fully done inside of the main, or inside of the natural expansion. Classic may have seen a glimpse. Okay, he notices right now. That's big. Immediately, 2 Phoenixes begin in the Stargates. If you're caught off guard against Mutants, you can just lose an entire mineral line in a minute, so you have to be extremely careful here as Classic. Now it's going to force Serral to sort of commit here at the 3rd base, and I think this is already, for the most part, defended. Yeah, 4th hatchery at this point is done. Ooh, what about this, though? The High Templar, they don't have an easy way to sustain themselves. One of them dies. Second one is being targeted down too. All right, it does end up falling. I mean, it's a lot of mutas, though, and obviously that Spire hasn't really done anything other than produce the mutas either. Spire is 200. Yeah, cost efficiency-wise, this is not the easiest game for Serral at all, and I love this. Classic immediately follows it up with a fleet beacon. He's decided he can't really defend, or he can't really, like, be the aggressor right now because the opponent can defend against 2 High Templar with Storm reasonably easily. He's gonna use some of the new High Templar here to start accumulating some of that energy once more. Serral, though, apparently has decided that this is the time to go for a creep highway. The Queens are being brought to the front. The Zerglings and the Roaches have already arrived. The Serral started to target fire down as many of those High Templar as possible. Tempest would be phenomenal to have right now, but of course, they're a long ways off. You have to wait until the Fleet Beacon is done, and the Fleet Beacon is ridiculously expensive. The Queens, in the meantime, are joining in the battle. Keep in mind that Queens cannot use their transfusion ability anymore off creep. So you gotta make sure that if you move them forward, you can actually, well, use them in combat. Healing cannot be done when the Queens are this far off the creep. High Templar, though, are achieving very little. The Storms have been decent enough, but across the board, this is looking like an extremely difficult to hold for Classic, with Serral striking exactly when the iron is hot. If he would have attacked a half minute later, there would probably be a Tempest about to spawn. If he attacked a little bit earlier, then the High Templar would probably still be out and, well, added a couple additional Storms into the mix. Serral hits right at the perfect moment, and the Queens, Roaches, and Ravagers are navigating this fight brilliantly. Yeah, probes are starting to fall. We do have a recall down south, so Classic trying to see if he can save some of the workers, but the problem is, I mean, the economy is nice, but if you can't hold the army, how in the world are you gonna win the game? Honestly, an insane timing attack here from Serral. There's really no way that he can have played like a game like this before. I mean, this looks like a pretty typical timing attack from Serral, but all of the regular attacking opportunities are thrown out of the window because of that Oracle opener. We don't see mass Oracle openers very frequently, so Serral forced to play a reactionary style, but he gets the job done and he makes it look easy. Next up, we find ourselves on Incorporeal. Classic wanted to be a little bit aggressive in game number 1, throw a little bit of a curveball at the opponent, and immediately Serral hits him in the face. I quite like this little bit of probe movement, actually. So during the EWC, we saw quite a few cannon rushes, specifically on this map. It turns out you can make a very nice little nuke right over here with a few pylons and a photon cannon right over there, and then you can go into the main base. I'm sure we'll get to some of those games too, so again, make sure you subscribe so you see as soon as those videos go live. Either way, it is kind of fun here of Classic to fake going for a cannon rush, even with just a little bit of probe movement. But yeah, that previous game was a perfect example as to why Serral is so freaking dangerous. If you decide to mix it up and you deviate from the standard, you better well do it in a very confident manner, because if you don't, you're likely going to get hit in the face. That Oracle build was nice, the Void Ray was kinda cute, but ultimately, exactly what damage did Classic do? He didn't really slow down the Zerg economy very much, so even though he had very cost-effective trades, he just didn't really have an easy plan when, well, the Zerg Sledgehammer went straight across the map. Did we just hit a supply block, Classic? Oof. Oof, that's not good. Pylon is going to finish up, but this pylon was supposed to be built a little sooner, and this is a very uncharacteristic error, especially at this level of play. This is something that is uncharacteristic in Diamond League and above, right? Like, forgetting your second pylon. Not really something you want to do, but I am sure that Classic is feeling the heat. So one really cool thing actually at the EWC this year is that the players had heart rate monitors. So you could actually see what their heart rate was like during a series like this. And it was pretty apparent to me, looking at all of the Serral games in particular, that his heart rate is very stable compared to a lot of the other players. We've seen, for example, there was a series, a best of 7, featuring Maru, where, like, I swear, for the entirety of the series, was it a best of 7 or a best of 5? I actually don't recall exactly. Anyways, for the entirety of the series, Maru was sitting at like 140 plus beats a minute. So he was doing like the equivalent of running a marathon whilst playing a very long series of StarCraft 2. Serral, though, ice cold across the board. Maybe we should all be doing a little bit of sauna. I know that's very popular in Finland and something that Serral has been vocal about enjoying quite a bit. Maybe that's what... I don't know. I don't know how much of an impact that has, but maybe stressing your heart with heat like that is actually... I don't know. But across the board... Ooh, almost misplacing the Nexus there too. Across the board, Serral seemed very calm and collected. Now, this is a very quick Glaive Adept opener, so Serral is gonna see that something is a little fishy. He can't see what upgrade is researching inside of the Twilight Council, but he's already got Zerglings out. This is way more Zerglings than you normally make at this stage of a Protoss versus Zerg, so he's gonna be running up towards the high ground, and he's looking to see if maybe he can get a cancel on the third Nexus. There is a single Oracle out, but where is it? Currently on the other side of the map, and that means that the Zerglings are indeed going to force the cancel on the third base. That now suddenly makes his Adept opener. Did he actually... No, he canceled the upgrade too. Ay, 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 ay. That means that all of this is starting to come down right now for Classic. Hitting a supply block, losing the third base, committing to a strategy, but then thinking better of it after the Overlord Scout goes in. This is going from bad to worse right now for Classic, who is going to be forced to cancel his third base a second time around. Look, before the final season of Game of Thrones, one of Serral's usernames or nicknames that we gave him was the Night King. We can kind of see why, you know? Like, this man is still an absolute monster and a stone-cold killer when he's given the chance. In the meantime, I don't believe he's really made any macro mistakes at home. We've got ourselves a lair coming up, +1 missile. Roaches are going to get their speed upgrade here in just a moment. 4th hatchery is building in the far bottom left. We don't really see a massive difference here in the supply count just yet, but this is certainly one of those games where Zerg can very quickly start to outgrow the Protoss. I guess the one saving grace here for Classic is that Serral did make that many lings. And with that many Zerglings, it's just, yeah, gonna cut into your worker production early on. So Classic here doesn't really need to deal a lot of eco damage in order to make life, you know, playable for himself. Like, in order to make this game more manageable, he doesn't really need to deal a lot of damage. But any follow-up right now is difficult for him to defend. Then again, we are on Incorporeal. And on Incorporeal, your first 3 bases are all up on a high ground. So as long as Classic can defend like a follow-up attack here by holding onto this ramp, holding onto that ramp, I mean, it's still a lot of area to cover, but Serral would always technically be engaging up a ramp, and that's never easily done. Blink at this point is finished. Storm on the back of this as well. Classic decided to basically cut every corner after falling behind earlier on, and I do quite like that decision. Still though, Infestation Pit coming up already. Serral can do whatever he likes, and I believe that this is now leading to a Hydra Den and then eventually a Lurker Den as well, together with a Hive. So Serral establishing an early game lead. He makes his opponent cut a bunch of corners here to stay alive, but then he's also making Classic remember some of those late games they have recently played, and that is where this game is now effectively headed here for Classic. If Classic wants to play a late game, this would be an opportunity for him to basically go straight into a fleet beacon, get a 4th Nexus going and all the rest of it, but Serral is more than down to play it. We've already seen it before. He's gonna test the waters here with a, well, quick little attack at the very least, some Roaches and Ravagers, a couple of Zerglings left over from the early game, but the real follow-up is this Hive, and I would imagine a Lurker Den. We should be seeing one in just a moment. Hydras for now, though. There's the Lurker Den. Okay. He even put it in the position where I expected it. Nice. Now, the first 3 bases on this map, very defendable. 4th Nexus, still reasonably tucked away, but not particularly straightforward. 5th base, though, is where it gets really hard. So either you take it over here in the corner, you take it over here in the middle, or you take it over here on the left. But all of those bases are extremely exposed and easy for Serral to attack into. Serral, in the meantime, though, already has that base in the far bottom left. He's now building up a 5th hatchery here, too. If Classic is not going to be able to get his Tempest out by the time that Lurkers hit the battlefield, he is going to be in a world of trouble. This is not a Protoss army that can reliably snipe Lurkers. Maybe 1 or 2 is fine, but if the Lurker numbers are big enough, Stalkers, they're not really going to cut it. Maybe if you have Immortal Archon with Zealots, for example, can kind of deal with it as far as army compositions on the ground go, but with this sort of setup, Classic really needs to get the Tempest out ASAP. He is going to get charged, though, and he is at the very least pretending like he's ready for a move out. Serral, though, in the meantime, on the other side of the map, has not really been slowed down much. His creep spread is looking pretty good. And in general, this is the real scary line of attack. Mothership immediately, which I quite like here for Classic. Classic is basically saying, yo, after the early game, I am cutting every corner. If I can get there eventually, life is gonna be good, but what about this move right now for Serral, who is somehow, some way, finding a surround in one of the weirdest sections of the map? All the High Templar are gone. And I believe those were the main targets here for Serral. He trades out a bunch of the Hydras here, some of the Roaches too, for Stalkers. But very soon... Wow, Serral playing this extremely conservatively, actually, but very soon, there we go. Lurkers can be coming up. The first 2 Tempests, though, are out. And you don't really need that much to be able to contest with Lurkers. I like this Prism, too. A Warpin in the main base. Really anything here to, like, slow down the Zerg for even just half a minute would be phenomenal for Classic. The main concern that you have right here as a Protoss player is the Zerg army burrowing Lurkers right next to your Nexus, and that obviously turns into a disaster very quickly. Love that little stasis ward again to slow everything down, and suddenly, there she is. Big Mama is out. Zealot's trying to charge at this ramp though, and so far, you know what? Classic had to cut many corners to get here, but if he can somehow, some way keep this base alive, the game is very playable for him again. Yep, cloaking field here is phenomenal. Nice blinkies as well to go after those weakened units. All right, not bad whatsoever. In the meantime, there is a little bit of a move as well on the left side of the map, and that is something that we're gonna have to see addressed here in a moment. Still though, the Protoss army is now once more in a position where I can actually fight that off the Zerg straight up. Serral hoping that he was going to be able to maybe capitalize with those lurkers immediately, but Classic playing it very smartly. And is now making a full-on transition towards Skytos. I kind of love it. Classic basically skipping all mid-game play. Like, he lost the third Nexus twice. Cancelled Glaive, got supply blocked with his second pylon, but he still managed to navigate the game in this direction. Generally speaking, mistakes made before like the 5-minute mark are just disastrous. Anyways, Knight is networking the back though, and in the meantime now Serral does find an engagement at the front where the probes are dropping like flies. Even though this kind of felt like the moment when Classic would likely be safe again, he still is actually losing to some really good multitasking here for Serral, who's also moving lurkers here towards the 9 o'clock, or the 12 o'clock right over here, through the 9 o'clock position. Zealots get cleaned up. 29 probes. Oof. Great movement here by the finisher. Suddenly, Classic's supply count has dropped down to only 48. And now he's 12 minutes into the game. He doesn't even have easy detection. Finally, the observers show up. But he doesn't even have an easy way out of this right now. Serral really showing us why he's such a dangerous player. We already have a Greater Spire done. Corruptors are out as well as a counter to the Tempests. And so far, in these games, Serral was showing us that he is an absolute monster. It's so funny, because when you watch Serral play, and maybe like some of you only ever watch Serral play, he makes Zerg look pretty freaking broken, man. Like, it's like, yeah, obviously Classic made some mistakes, but like, geez Louise. Serral just seems to be everywhere, and all of the movement here is pretty much impossible to stay on top of. Look at the minimap right now as well. Serral suddenly just taking over whatever he can. Classic is stuck in his little opening quadrant, and now we're, well, 13 minutes in. That means the main, the natural even, is gonna run out. The third is not gonna be too far behind. These mineral fields only have a couple hundred minerals remaining. Misposition here on some of those flying units right now too. The Corruptors swoop in. He needs to be careful with that time warp ability, but he dodges the Archons underneath. And GG gets called. Serral gets another point on the board. Next up, we find ourselves on the map Ultra Love. So far, this series is looking extremely one-sided. Classic really is gonna have to step up if he wants to be able to beat somebody like Serral. Now, he's done it before recently, but so far this series has just been straight up one-sided, to the point where Serral is once more making Zerg look imba, and all the Zerg players are sitting at the edge of their seats because they're like, oh my god, Zerg is amazing! But then at the same time, they're like, well, if Zerg is so amazing, maybe they're gonna nerf Zerg again! Look, this man has been single-handedly nerfing Zerg since 2018 when he won the World Cup for the very first time around, and he is still looking like the absolute best player in the world. It's kind of nutty, really. But anyways, look, the previous games were relatively sloppy from Classic's point of view, right? That's not me being mean. That's just me being analytical. He made a series of errors in the previous game, and Serral just simply played better. So if you want to be able to beat Serral, you're gonna have to play better than him, which is not easily done, because he seems to be pretty much the perfect package as far as StarCraft 2 gaming goes. Pretty much perfect micro, pretty much perfect macro, great strategic decision, and then maybe most importantly in a setting like this, he can keep his head cool. Like, the pressure never really seems to get to him. And that is something that almost feels like you either have or you don't. Like, obviously you can practice playing on a stage in front of a crowd of people, But if you're somebody that gets very nervous from the prospects of winning, you know, in this case, like a $200,000 first place prize, if that makes you nervous, which it would make me, if that keeps on talking to you in the back of your head, you're probably screwed. And I don't think Serral really notices that. It definitely helps that he's already been very successful in the past. And that, you know, I don't want to say like 200k more or less doesn't matter to him, but like, you know, like I'm sure he prefers winning over losing, but it always seems to me that some of the top level StarCraft 2 competitors are just able to almost like switch off their emotions and just play to the absolute best of their abilities. And Serral is certainly a prime example of exactly that. So far though, Classic is gonna have to also turn off some of those emotions. Maybe not a great idea in life, but in certain moments like this, it can be very beneficial. Okay, look, we're going into the good old Glaive the Depths here. Last game, he started up Glaive the Depths, cancelled it in favor of Blink. I think it was because Serral scouted him, and he saw that there was no Forge. Generally speaking, when you go into Charge or you go into Blink first, you also build a Forge at the same time, and Serral effectively saw the entire base, and he knew that there was no Forge out, so Classic decided to just cancel because he knew he got countered. Now he hasn't been scouted. Still though, it feels a little cheap, right, to try and rely on this sort of build, but it's still a legitimate build. Maybe he can now catch the Zerg player off guard, as he's got little pockets of Adepts. Serral is actually slightly supply blocked here, but he's already got a drone available to complete the wall. Serral actually really doesn't have that many units, but he's got more roaches spawning. Yep, I love this. Oh, this is buying him so much time, though. Oracle, in the meantime, throws down a little stasis ward. Serral moves at the perfect moment. Still, though, when the Adept starts shading around a few times like this, we might very well see a real problems arrive. Already, though, Serral goes into the Pneumatized Carapace research. That is the Overlord speed upgrade. Okay. So I think he's got a follow-up planned immediately. Blink on the back of this right here for Classic, who has now killed 11 drones. Little reinforcement group over here too, but another evolution chamber to block his advancement on this side. Yeah, okay. This is actually working out really well for him now. When it was originally like 11, it didn't really feel that great. 19, 20, can we get it 21? Well, 20 is still really, really nice, of course. My main concern, though, is the counterattack. 21 workers in total on Serral's side go down. My main concern right now is the counterattack that Classic will be forced to deal with in a moment. Because, yeah, we do have Overlord speed, and I would imagine we're going to be loading the queens into little dropper lords, and we're going to go across the map. No roach speed. There is a lair. Serral purposefully apparently not willing to spend the 100 minerals and the 100 gas on roach speed. Love this, by the way. Classic knocking down the cooling tower to create a wall off over here, knowing very well that all he really needs is time. Serral now only at 40 workers, 66 probes available for Classic. He's going to be able to outgrow the Zerg very quickly, but he needs to not lose within the next minute, and this is still a very scary amount of Zerg. 66 army supply versus only 39. Corrosive Bile's obviously extremely powerful at this phase in the game. Classic just needs to hold on, but does he have enough to be able to actually pull that off? I love the stasis wards. Stasis wards in unorthodox positions. That is why they're working out quite well for him. Used up on the high ground, but now the dropper lords are coming. Maybe just to ferry some of the units in. It looks like the queens have just managed to walk across. Corrosive Biles do get dodged for the most part. Oracles are now almost out of energy, but still, energy recharge is very, very nice here. And it looks like Classic, after dealing a lot of damage, is slowly but surely starting to get the upper hand in this engagement too. Still though, Serral is rallying more and more units across. He has good creep spread. Only 36 workers, and it's not going to be enough. GG gets called as Classic obtains a point on the board. A very important win for Classic. If you fall 3-0 behind against somebody like Serral, look, I don't want to say your chances become 0, but it may as well be. Very uncommon for Serral to lose a whole lot of maps back to back to back, but a 2-1 scoreboard is very recoverable, and also it shows to Classic that he can win, right? Like, it's very doable. In the previous game, he played pretty much perfectly, not really making any mistakes, cleverly adjusting his strategy to what was needed in that particular moment of the game and reading it pretty much perfectly too. It's a confidence booster for sure, and it's gonna give Classic a little bit of positive momentum once more. The only concern that I really have here for Protoss is that it was all built upon a Glaive Adept opener. And Glaive Adepts, they're not quite hard counterable, but Zerg can definitely clean them up very quickly if they see that it's coming. You kind of rely on your opponent not realizing that that is the follow-up. So if Zerg assumes, hey, this is going to be good old Blink Stalkers with +1, I mean, that is what Serral was effectively prepared for in the previous game. But if they figure out that it's Glaive Adepts instead, they can deal so much damage to that army immediately, and then suddenly as Protoss you look a little bit foolish. So it wasn't necessarily a straight-up game, but I mean, still, you know, it's not really a tricky game, not really a cheesy game. But I don't think it's a build order you can really bring out multiple times in a series. Or at the very least not game, you know, back to back in games. I don't think it's really ideal. So Stargate is going to be his main weapon of choice here again. It is absolutely the gold standard in this matchup. As a matter of fact, it's only gotten better over the years. It's kind of funny. But the energy recharge ability just makes Oracles so freaking strong. One build actually that we did see at the EWC quite a bit, that I quite liked. I'm a little conflicted on it. I don't know if I like it, but I think it's cool. Is a Phoenix first into Oracles. Your main concern is that you have to delay your third Nexus until about the 4-minute mark. But you can get a lot of value with the Phoenix early on and effectively deny all scouting from the opponent. Usually Protoss players end up getting even like a third gateway before it, so you can sort of go like triple gateway, Phoenix into double Oracle. You get a third Nexus at about the 4-minute mark, and you end up, yeah, really like throwing all of your regular timings off by like 10-15 seconds or so. But it seems to really confuse the Zerg opponents quite a bit. Because a 4-minute Nexus, so this is about a 345 Nexus or so, 350. It's like this is a very normal timing and certainly nothing too crazy, but it's quite common these days for Zerg players to go up against like a 3.5-minute Nexus. We've even seen like a 305 Nexus, like a super quick one. And this is the type of opener. I mean, this is not like the Phoenix though, really. We're just doing the same thing again. All right, well, the Phoenix build is cool. Not what we have right here from Classic, as we once more go into good old Glaive Adepts. So in game number 2, he went Glaive Adepts, cancelled it when he got scouted. Game number 3, he went Glaive Adepts again, didn't cancel it, and it worked out brilliantly for him. Now, if you're Serral at this point, what do you assume? Serral decides to go Baneling Nest, although I believe he already planted this down before he saw the Twilight Council. It certainly is a little fishy. No fort spotted anywhere. And it certainly does mean here that Protoss could go for effectively an identical strategy as the one we saw in the previous game. I think there might be a little bit of a hole over here right next to the Adept, but maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah, there definitely is enough room for Zerglings to run in. Serral though going quick +1 melee together with a Baneling Nest. It means that he could go for a Baneling Bust. I mean, honestly, if you just make non-stop Zerglings and you blow up these Adepts and then immediately go in for a counter-attack, what in the world do you do as Protoss? Keep in mind that the shades of the Adepts don't have a lot of vision. Okay, he sees the Banelings right now. That's big. They have a little bit of vision, but not a ton. Not as much as the Adept itself. So sometimes Protoss players can get way caught off guard against those Banelings. Zerglings already setting themselves up for another run-by on the right. Lair now, finally. Nearly 6 minutes into the game. No Roach Warren. Maybe these Adepts can actually get something done. The majority of the Lings, though, are in the top right. And I don't know if Classic is aware of them. +1 melee finishing up in just a few seconds' time. It's a big damage boost. Normally, you kind of stop making Adepts at some point here as Protoss. But yeah, you assume most of the time that you're going to be able to destroy Zerglings with them. But +1 melee, look at that. Dealing so much additional damage. What about the Banelings over here, though? Finally, the Oracles come home to try and defend this mineral line once again. Not the end of the world, though, for Classic. but also not a similar situation as the previous game. In the previous game, he had already killed 20 plus workers at this point. Ooh, that was close. If you complete the shade onto Banelings, well, let's just say the adepts don't live for particularly long. Serral's still targeting down probes. And even though all of this looks kind of negligible, 8 probes is actually quite significant. In isolation, a lot of those little engagements don't matter much. But if you've done 0 damage on the other side of the map here as classic, as far as the worker count goes, and you do lose 8 probes in the meantime, and then also lose a bunch of your adepts as they try to make the long trek back home. I mean, man, these guys died right outside of the front door. It's a little bit unfortunate. And look, it's these little advantages that Serral keeps on building up. Very different strategy for him, though, this time around. It's going to be a Hydraling Bane build. We don't really see a lot of Banelings against Protoss in general, honestly. Banelings against Protoss are a bit uncommon, but so far, Serral's doing a good job navigating this slightly unorthodox playstyle. Back in the day, actually, this was a very common strategy. Dang. We're really trying to make sure that those Banelings get killed. Yeah, Serral partially responsible for the Baneling nerf in this matchup. Banelings used to be able to, with +2 melee, for example, one-shot workers. They did that for like the first 12 years of StarCraft 2's existence, and Zerg players kind of loved it. Oh no, don't lose the Prism though. Okay, nice targeting here on the Hydra. Losing the Prism is very painful. Serral so far though, looking like a well-oiled machine throughout this entire series. Sure, the previous game was a loss, but across the board, he is looking very sharp. The previous game was a misread, but also it's a misread based off of incomplete information. So, yeah, like you kind of have to make, like at some point, StarCraft 2 can become a little bit of like a rock, paper, scissors game, right? Where you have to make decisions based on the information that you have. Across the board, Serral does seem to be very sharp. And right now, again, like not really too much has happened so far in this particular game, but we're already at a very significant supply advantage. And it's all those little moves. In isolation, none of them really matter. But in the grand scheme of things, it adds up very rapidly. Suddenly, he's maxed out. High Templar do have Storm available. Obviously, that's one of the big differences between this year and last year. The energy recharge ability on the Nexus. Protoss players like Classic have been loving it, because you can very quickly energy recharge a High Templar and get your storms out. It makes Protoss very dangerous defensively, but Serral, though, is just about ready to go in for a bust. And if I know one thing of Zerg players is that they love busting. Let's see. The Banelings are starting to roll through. He's hunting for the High Templar. The High Templar, though, so far protected quite nicely by the bulk of the Protoss army. Oracle gets rolled forward. The probes have mostly already been retreated. What about the fight over here? Looks like the Prism is not going to be able to put in a lot of counter damage. Those storms also don't achieve much. Yeah, 13 workers in total do still end up falling, and the Nexus itself as well. What an engagement right here from Serral again. Kind of looked like Classic had it defended initially when the High Templar didn't immediately die, but Serral immediately repositioned its units and found out exactly, well, where he needed to put his army to negate as much of that splash damage as possible. The trade-off is movement, right? Because when you're moving Zerglings or Hydras, they're not firing. So there is like a very real potential of over-microing. Quite a common thing, actually, especially in like, I want to say Diamond League and like the lower ends of Master League. We see a lot of over-micro, where you're just moving your army around so much that you're actually not optimizing the damage. Prism here, move commanded in. Classic really just can't get his feet under him in a straight-up macro game. Next up, we find ourselves on Ley Lines. This is a best-of-9 series, meaning that the first player to win 5 maps will be the victor. No vetoes for either player. Interestingly enough, though, we haven't seen, for example, Last Fantasy yet. So during a best-of-9 series like this, players just get to decide the order in which the maps get played in, and usually it's just like a back and forth, like an A, B, A, B, A, B, until you get to 9 maps. Sometimes it's like AA, BB, AA, BB, as in like map order rotation, but so far, none of the spiciest maps have been chosen. It's funny. It's almost like a gentleman's agreement, you know? Like sometimes a map is a little bit too good for one race. And then players are like, well, I guess if we need it, we'll bring it out in map number 7, map number 8, map number 9. If it was me, I would not be very honorable like that. No, no. At that point, like, you know, I obviously cheating is not allowed. But look, if you want to get whatever advantage you can out of just, you know, your map order and your map picks, your map vetoes and all the rest of it, 100% fair game. Now, will we go into a Twilight Council and Glaives once again? Because look, that previous game was a great example of Classic doing effectively the same build back to back, and it working out brilliantly the first time around and then terribly the second time around. There is about 0% chance that Serral would lose to it again. You have to keep making switch-ups. And this is once more, though, a very normal start, right? So 3 minutes and 50 seconds. It's a little old school. Serral making just enough Zerglings and a little bit of Zergling micro as well. The Oracle is not currently at home. What about canceling the third? Oh, he does get the cancel on the third, as the second Oracle was a little bit late. Serral committing to a handful of links. The perfect number of Zerglings here, it turns out. To force the cancel on that Nexus if the first Oracle goes across the map, and if the second Oracle is not immediately chrono boosted. These are little plays, but if Serral did not believe he was going to be able to get the cancel on the third like that, he would not have made those Zerglings. Because obviously, every 2 Zerglings you make could have been a drone. Oracle? Ah, you can't afford doing that, Classic. You really can't. We're only 5 minutes into the game, not even. And I'm already loving this position here for Serral. Like, look, if you only pay attention to the units lost or the resources lost, it doesn't look like that big of a deal. But all of this adds up so quickly. Now suddenly you're playing a slight uphill battle. It's not a very significant uphill battle, but still one that is worth noting, and it now requires some mistakes. Maybe Serral got a little too greedy, though, as the Adepts now just walk into the natural expansion. 1 drone goes down. Can we target the worker fleet? 2nd drone goes down. Immediately recalling. Okay. 2 probes. Or 2 drones, rather. 3 of them in total. I don't hate it here for Classic. Very quick Templar archives, too. So this is one of the things that Classic has been popularizing over the last few months, where he seems to delay the 4th Nexus in favor of a faster Templar Archives. It's very powerful if played correctly. But again, look, the entire premise of an opener like this, at least in my mind, is to force the games to go longer, because Protoss, at least according to the StarCraft 2 community, and looking at the win-loss ratios and a lot of the games we watch over the years right now, Protoss seems to be favored in the late game. Right? Like, that is what all of this is leading up to. But then your opponent is Serral, and that doesn't seem to hold true anymore. So what do you change up right here as the Protoss? Do you go for a timing attack? Do you just go straight into the late game and maybe give it another shot, see how it goes this time around? It's one of the problems that Serral's opponents have been forced to deal with over the years, where, like, there's this, like, accepted truth that Zerg late game kind of sucks against Protoss. And then that's true for everybody out there except Serral. And if it's then not true for Serral, your entire strategic game plan is thrown out a window. Because if suddenly you can't play your late game style anymore, or at least not as effectively, how do you manage that? How do you navigate that? Option A, you try to just do it anyways, see how it goes. I think it's not a bad idea in a series like this. Option B, you get very quietly up out of your chair and you sneak on over to Serral's computer, right? So Classic needs to be like maybe crawling on over there, and then you quickly unplug Serral's keyboard. Those really are the 2 options in my mind. I don't think option 2 is allowed, though. That's the... Anyways. What is this, Serral? What are we doing? Tunneling Claws together with Burrow. Okay. There's already a lot of roaches out. This is very odd, actually, though. He doesn't even have Tunneling Claws yet, though, as he's just running into the base right now. I really don't love this play from Serral, but maybe it's a main distraction. I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of roaches. Classic also sort of scratching his head here. Look at this. There's a giant March of the Overlords again. Serral throwing out a very strange timing here. Now suddenly, though, we're only about maybe 20 seconds away from Burrow being done. Fourth hatchery already in a world of trouble. It's not easy for Protoss to split up their High Templar. Burrow is finishing. Maybe it was a little early right there with that push in. Or maybe Classic committed more to the main defense there as Serral was expecting. There will be a snipe on the 4th. And 15 probes have already gone down as well. We'll probably see a Hive in a moment. Second Evo chamber on the back of this too. Creep spread at the front is actually kind of sick. Fourth Nexus, though, at the bottom of the map is now gone, right? And that makes this entire setup very tricky. 76 workers, though, for Serral is not that much, but here we go. Tunneling Claws against Protoss is pretty nuts. We only really ever see this in ZVZ. Protoss usually will build up a photon cannon or two, and photon cannons are detectors. You need to have some sort of vision here against those tunneled roaches, but Serral bringing them out here. And it seems like it's mostly just one giant distraction to keep the Protoss player pinned on 3 bases. Serral effectively saying, look, you're allowed to have a 4th base for a little bit. You're allowed to have 3 bases too, but I'm not gonna let you mine a 4th. And on only 3 bases, Protoss can't really make a Stargate transition. Like, you can't really go into the Skytles late game here. So what do you do now as Classic? This has now forced Classic into the scariest thing imaginable to a StarCraft player. And that is to think. Classic now needs to sit here and think while playing the game. We do the thinking when we watch our replays of our lost games. We do thinking outside of the game, not whilst we're playing. And look, there's a pesky little Zergling here. Classic delayed for like another half minute on the 4th base. Serral, in the meantime, already lining up his next attack. No unit in the wall off, so the Zerglings swoop in. There's one pylon to effectively power half this base, which is kind of a disaster. Serral spots it, splits up the units again. Lurker Den in the meantime on the back of this as well. Without a 4th base, you can't go Skytles, and without Skytles, how in the world do you counter Lurkers? Serral's plan seems to have a very similar idea, but the ways in which he gets there is different every time. Adrenal Glands is another phenomenal upgrade. Still though, Classic does have a massive army, and I like this force. This is honestly the perfect timing for him to go. He should go right now. If he waits, he is likely going to get overwhelmed by Lurkers, but we're not quite at Lurker tech yet. As a matter of fact, Serral has gone for Banelings. So we have Roach, Ravager, Ling, Bane. The High Templar, oh yes, I love the High Templar. High Templar protected in the back. Baneling's trying to roll through. Roach is trying to move up a ramp, but I think the numbers here are maybe just barely good enough for Classic. Great storms right there, and perfect micro actually from Classic. I don't think he could have really controlled that much better than that. Unless he becomes an artificial intelligence one day, but for now, dealing with the limitations of human flesh, I think that's about the best case scenario. All right, calm down now, buddy. We don't need to be storming the random bits of creep. Stasis Wards in the middle of this engagement too. Zerglings going in for the counterattack. Classic trying to go full caveman. And you know what? Oh, that's an aggressive blink. So far, so good. There are now still a High Templar inside of the Prism. And a Stalker, apparently. Accidentally loading that one in. Zergling counterattack too. Trying to put some work down. And now we go Fleet Beacon and Stargate. Oh, you can blink into the main, but that's extremely ballsy. I don't think you want to do that. Don't do it, Classic. You're going to get killed, dude. Don't do it. Okay, now, similar situation as for Protoss, right? Protoss can't really play Skytles on 3 bases very easily. Zerg can't really play lurkers on 3 bases very easily. Obviously, Serral was mining off of 4 or 5 bases there for a while. So at least he does still have a little bit of savings left over from that. But, I mean, the supply count here is looking pretty even. And Serral now sitting at a pretty low amount of supply and really not that many lurkers. I don't think this is a lurker count that you can really easily counter with. Which is buying time for Classic to go into Sky Toss. Excellent comeback right here from Classic, though, because this was the type of game that was starting to slip out of his fingers. But at this point, I really don't mind this position very much. He does need a 4th base, though. Yeah, he's being a little bit, maybe a little bit too cautious. Serral, in the meantime, double expanding. Not a bad idea. But look, as long as the Skytles units are out, maybe he can even afford a mothership. It is going to be difficult for Serral to address that with just Hydraling Bane Lurker. Like, he's probably going to need some sort of follow-up here in a moment to... yeah, maybe a Spire or something to reliably deal with that. But again, if you're already struggling to barely afford Lurkers, how are you going to be able to, like, transition from Lurkers into a massive Corruptors? Okay, Serral smashed his piggy bank and afforded 1 Viper. Just 1 Viper. That's all we get. I kind of like Classic's idea, though, of moving onwards again. He still has the Oracle. Yeah, Revelation and then the Tempests. Or the Stalkers, I suppose, to just pick off whatever you can. Good Storms. This Oracle is critical, though, so I really don't want to see it YOLO in. Oh, careful against those Hydras, dude. They will absolutely destroy it. Little Zergling counter-attack as well. Nice move here by Serral, who really just wants to get the Nexus itself. Adrenal Glance is done on these Zerglings. Oh, God. No, not enough. Not enough. Not enough. Only +1 melee. Initially, that Zergling group was, well, very quickly destroying that Nexus. Classic, slowly navigating this game now, but doing so brilliantly. He needs to be careful he doesn't get overwhelmed by lurkers. Serral trying to push them in through the choke point. Man, I'm a little afraid for the ways that he moves around this detection here, because it seems a bit risky, but the storms are just glorious. Yep. Cool guys don't look at explosions as the hatchery the hatchery falls with the final shot of the Tempest. The rest of the Protoss army already moving away. We do have some abductions, though. Those Vipers not to be underestimated. And it looks like Serral's still thinking about this Nexus. Do you still think about me? Asks Serral to the Nexus. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it doesn't matter as long as there's HP above 0. Immortal production has begun. So look, this is basically Classic making it so that his opponent can never really transition to anything but what he's got right now. So as long as there's no Corruptors out, all the units he's making right now make a ton of sense. He's basically saying, very similar to what Serral was trying to do earlier, right? He's basically saying, yo, you're never going to be able to get enough economy to make a proper late-game army. I'm just going to keep storming you to death all over the map. These pesky lurkers, though. Can we maybe target the Nexus? I feel like with all these missed shots, you could have had it by now. He could have easily had it. Alright, anyways. Calm and collected. Difficult game, though, for Classic to read, right? Because, yeah, you've done a lot of damage, but also it's really hard to actually say what your current stand in the game is. Serral looking to see if he can finish up the base. The Zerglings, though, get pushed around and will not achieve their job. Risky, though, for Classic to move in. Every time he overextends like that, yep, yoink, the Vipers will abduct whatever they can. +1 air weapons coming up here as well for Classic. Very slow, honestly. Should have been there a while ago. And now the Lurker is targeting down the Nexus. And now, it looks to me like, indeed, yeah, the Nexus falls. Nice little side quest right there for Serral. He finally Gets a little bit of counter damage done again. My main concern here, though, for the Finnish player is that he needs to do something against this Protoss army. And as long as Classic, doesn't move command into Lurkers, my god, I was just gonna bring it up. As long as Classic doesn't move command into Lurkers, he's gonna be fine. Serral, though, trying to set up a surround. Blinding Clouds get down as well. Storms, though, are blanketing the entirety of the Zerg army. Serral's supply immediately plummets, and keep in mind that he is not really in a position to easily remax here. Likewise, though, Classic only on 49 probes. It's really not that much economy. Lurkers again. Underground, so much value. Storms are here, and they are good. Another hatchery will bite the dust. In the meantime, there was a little bit of a counterattack too, but it looks like maybe the photon cannon together with the zealot, maybe a storm or two, ended up dealing enough damage to whatever Zerg was attacking with. And slowly but surely, Classic is tightening the noose. Serral needs to do something, but he can't really... He's bleeding out. Digging deeper, just to throw it away. Just... There's certain sentences I can't say. Is it possible to say, he's bleeding out, and then, like, not anything else? I don't think so. Anyway, storms do go down. Good time warp here as well. Classic trying to deny another base. Man, those storms are absolutely glorious. Yeah, any song that I quote, especially from, you know, especially the songs that, like, millennials used to listen to back in the day, or maybe you still listen to. A lot of my viewers seem to be millennials. Just like myself, by the way. Millennial gang, am I right? Get those Zoomer... Oh, no, actually, Zoomers are cool, too. No, what... Gen Alpha? Nah, I don't know. What about Boomers? Do we have any... Actually, looking at my YouTube analytics, I do know there are some people above the age of 70 that watch. Shout out to my 70-plus-year-old viewers. Maybe it's just my mom. Actually, my mom's not that old. Don't tell her I said that. Anyways. Yeah, Classic is trying to go around the corner here and just try to bleed him out. But it's difficult. It's not easily done. He needs to make sure he doesn't overextend. Keep in mind, this is a series for a $200,000 first place price. Classic has this one in the bag, but it's easy for us to judge. GG gets cold, though, as Serral decides to leave the game. Next up, we find ourselves on the map Torches. Looking at the scoreboard now, life is really not that bad here for Classic. I do feel like across the board, Serral has been playing a better series. But keep in mind that one of the losses of Classic was because, well, he got supply blocked, he like cancelled one of his upgrades, and across the board, he played pretty terribly for a game played at this level. But he's managed to move himself past that point. Believe it or not, pro gamers are human, at least the vast majority of them are. I think, I don't know. The jury is not yet out on max specs, but across the board, most pro gamers appear to be human. And Classic had what we could call a bit of a human moment there, where he did make a mistake. It's important not to make as many of those, though, and so far in the series, he has now made it, well, only a 3-2 advantage for the opponent. And that previous game was good, right? Like, that previous game was solid. He got an advantage early on, and he built upon that advantage throughout the rest of the game without, and this is the key, I think, without, like, forcing it to go super long. One of the problems that a lot of Protoss players run into right now against Serral is that they sort of just let the Zerg player do whatever they like, and then at some point they arrive in that extreme late game. That's where most Zerg players falter. Serral, though, seems to have, well, a way of beating them still. I think Classic navigated that very nicely with some clean attacks and, well, some really nice storms. So, Stargate opener again here. No surprise. Serral, though, taking the right side hatchery on Torches. Okay, so mining out the skinny mineral fields here first to now go into the third hatchery right over in that section. Classic is looking around. All he needs to see is that the mineral fields are mined out. Yep. He does right now. Technically, I guess it could still be a base over here at the gold. But I think the Oracle is going to be able to confirm whether or not that's the case here in just a moment, as he's already rallied it beyond the little wall. Classic, though, making sure he's not going to get caught off guard against this section of the map. There were some really cool timing attacks, actually, specifically on this map from Zergs, where they decided to go for a really aggressive push through those mineral fields. Yeah, Classic actually opening it up himself right now. Curious little way of walling off, I suppose, right? But it works. Alright, third Nexus is going to be planted over here, as both players have decided that they want to be neighbors. Aw, how cute. Alright, let's see. That does mean that most of the left side of the map is difficult to acquire, though. Like, technically, it's wide open, but you're likely going to have a lot of issues here, as both players will probably try to push for the gold. The gold base is just incredibly valuable, but obviously, well, you don't really want to give your opponent it for free. This is a difficult spot, though, right here, for Protoss, I think, in particular. If Zerg goes for, like, So Storm is phenomenal, right? Like, when you have Storm out, defending becomes pretty straightforward, or at least you can put a lot of damage on your opponent's units. But Storm is also an upgrade that takes a long time, and it's expensive, and you can't really rush it out. So if you're going up against, like, a Roach Ravager, Zergling Queen all-in, like a push that hits, yeah, by spreading creep down south, and then Zerg just slowly moves it over in this direction, it's so difficult to hold on. So for now, it's just going to be Blink. Blink together with +1, it looks like. I wouldn't even mind seeing Glaives here, or maybe even like a charge lot type of situation, but Serral, though, already has started making roaches. Only 49 workers here in total, 3 gas. Zergling speed just seconds away from finishing. No lair, no Evo chamber, no Baneling nest, none of that. I love this, yes. Sniping the creep tumors is critical. Slowing down any way that the Zerg can attack is massive. Serral, though, already putting up a backup tumor here in this direction, and apparently doubling down as well. As the ladies get to go through the choke point, Serral is making himself up for a very big attack. Now let's see if Classic made a tremendous error here by going into this expansion on the right. He really doesn't have to go in this direction, but he may as well go ahead and give it a shot. Well, let's see. Blink is not yet available. We're about a half minute away from that upgrade being done. I would love to see Chrono Boost on that Classic, but I guess he is not really able to at this point in time. Some decent corrosive balls do go down. Sentries are here too. Don't lose the sentries. Okay, good force field. Still, though, no Blink is going to make any defense here so much harder. Oracles have found a bit of an angle to deal damage. Obviously, though, with the positioning of the third hatch, Serral can just rally reinforcements towards this base so quickly. Energy recharge right there on the shield battery. I don't know if I like that. I think that should have gone onto the Oracles here instead. Serral just overwhelming those. So he's seeing, okay, yo, if you took the base over here, I will just immediately, well, snipe as many of those workers as possible. Now Blink is done, but I mean, it feels a little bit too late, as a lot of those stalkers are already gone. Blinking in the wrong direction there too. Serral's going to be able to get a base kill here. Easy peasy. Is he gonna drone? Yep, he is gonna drone. Drones together with a lair. I think Classic should have gone for the base over here. Would have been far more reliable, and at the very least he can sort of force the game to go to distance. But if you go normal Blink against an opponent that is expanded right next door, I feel like it's difficult to stay in the game. If the Zerg goes for any sort of aggression whatsoever, and yeah, maybe in practice, Classic went up against Zerg players in a similar spot that decided to not attack him, but now suddenly Serral can even double expand. Okay. So we're gonna take the gold base together with an expansion there on the left. Serral expanding up to, well, a total of 5 bases, and Classic is currently stuck on 2. Trying to see if he can maybe remake this. Serral could even block the Nexus from coming up if he notices. He's busy fighting, though. Okay. The Nexus does start up, just barely in time. Creep spread already looking absolutely ridiculous, too, by the way. Dark Shrine. Okay. That's one way, I guess, of trying to climb your way back into the match. In the meantime, though, We've got the pylon getting sniped over here. And the infestation pit is going to allow Serral here to go straight into a hive. So maybe just, again, into lurkers. Classic is stuck on 2 bases, by the way. He's now starting up a 3rd Nexus again, but this is one of those games where Zerg is just gonna run away with it, and maybe that's where the Dark Shrine comes in. Maybe that's the idea, to try and, like, deal critical amounts of damage. But look, it's not 2010 anymore. Zerg players of this caliber should never even take any damage from the Dark Templar, let alone lose the game. Problem is, when you go for an Oracle opener, you're forcing out Spore Crawlers. And Spore Crawlers are detectors. So if you're, gonna run Dark Templar, oh my god, no way. There was nothing protecting the wall off. Oracles do get recalled into the main base, but Serral now has, a bunch of Zerglings in here, and he will still be able to kill a load of workers. He's cancelled the base over here as well on the low ground, cancelled the base over here as well on the left side. We're now building up a robo facility together with a robo base. So now we're going for a, even a contamination right here on the forge just to rub some salt in the wound. We're going for a, what is this, like a 12-minute 2-base all-in? I wish you good luck, Classic. Serral even sending in the drones right now to try and mine out these skinny mineral fields and maybe open up the door for the rest of the Zerg army to go in. Serral's saying, yo, get out of my game. Let's go to the next one. I can smell $200,000 here. To be fair, though, this is also the type of game where you may as well just let the opponent sit here for a bit. Because this is looking like a unlosable game right now for Serral. I mean, I'm sure it... Oh, we're going Disruptors. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Disruptors are extremely uncommon in this matchup for good reason. Mostly because they suck. That's the reason we rarely see them. They died to Zerglings, they died to Roaches, they died to... they died to everything. But I guess if you need some sort of, like... trick, and the Dark Templar really didn't do it, you may as well give that a try. Serral, though, is going to be at Hive Tech, and as soon as he sees a Disruptor, I think he'll immediately fire up a couple of Vipers. Vipers would be phenomenal. It's such an uncommon unit, though, that he's not really... Like, we see it all the time against Terran, right? In Protoss versus Terran, Disruptors are pretty good. In Protoss versus Zerg, though, they really aren't great. Classic, though, trying to see if maybe he can come up with a win condition. Even if it's one that has very slim chances of working. Ultimately, if you can find it, there's always an opportunity. And he does still have a pretty decent army. I just don't believe that decent is going to be good enough. Now the Novas indeed, okay, do end up going down. But look at the Zergling surrounding everything. We have a Ultralisk Cavern on the back of this in Classic, yeah. He realized that this was a last-ditch effort. It's not going to happen. GG. And that takes us to Maganatha. Match point here for Serral. For the EWC 2025 win. And also for the potential of becoming the very first 3-time world champion in StarCraft 2. It's been over 10 years, though, since we last had a world champion that played Protoss. The most recent one being SOS, who is the other 2-time world championship winner. Serral, though, currently really only just at the same level as SOS as far as, well, world championship wins go. And obviously, the times have changed quite a bit. He's looking extremely lethal, though, throughout these games. I don't really think there's been much of a period where Serral hasn't looked like this. Since like 2018 or so, he's pretty much always looked like the very best player in the world. There's a lot of people out there that will disagree and obviously, discussing who the greatest StarCraft 2 player is in the world or of all time is like one of the, one of the many fun things that StarCraft fans like to do. But when Serral performs like this, and when you look at his results since 2018, there really isn't any doubt in my mind. Like, it's just not even particularly close anymore. The man is even when Zerg is across the board considered to be reasonably weak. Like Zerg right now, at the very least, if you compare it to when Serral first won the World Championship, right? So when he first won back in 2018, Zerg was so much better. Like literally all the core units that Zerg had back then were better. Obviously, balance has been adjusted a lot, right? But little things like Banelings dealing more damage, Banelings having additional health. They had +5 HP. Queens were able to have additional range. They were able to transfuse off creep. They were 25 minerals cheaper. I mean, the entire game has been changed since then, but I think across the board, and I would have to look up all the changes since that time period, but I think across the board, Zerg, at least relative to the opposing races, is quite a bit weaker since then. But time and time again, every time that people say, yo, Serral, I mean, look, Zerg may just be no longer the way to go. Every single time, Serral has seemingly solved that puzzle. And so far, this series is no different. Serral playing extremely tidy, extremely clean. Yeah, he did lose games. But even the games that he lost here so far are still sort of within his own control. Because the games where he lost were, you know, either like him getting a little bit ahead of himself, right? Where maybe he like over-pushed it a little bit. Or, for example, in that Glaive to Depth all-in game, Classic managed to catch him off guard. Like, misreads happen when you have incomplete information, but I think across the board, Serral is looking like the better player between these two. Still though, the games where Classic did look good, he looked very strong, but that previous one really just was not it. Every time he has lost, I feel like it's because he just couldn't really get his feet under him. And that is a rough situation to be in. Let's see. Getting a drone here. Getting a second drone be big. Not quite gonna be able to get that. I actually... I don't like the commitment with 2 adepts. I think 2 adepts for 1 drone is very shaky because now you have to leave your Oracle at home if you want to keep your 3rd base alive. Also, Classic about 10 seconds late on the 3rd Nexus. He must have made some sort of macro mistake. But losing the adepts, it now means that the Zerglings go in for the counter and the Oracle can't easily go in for the damage that you want it to be dealing. Still though, I mean, we did have a few drones going down there. It's a very large map, so at the very least that will kind of work out, I guess, for Classic here. But it is not really the beginning you're dreaming of, right? This is not the dream start of a Protoss in this matchup. Twilight Council together with a Forge. Serral scouts it perfectly yet again. One thing actually that Serral does really well if you study some of his replays is that rarely do his Overlords go in the exact same scouting pattern. So you will see a lot of... I'm like, for example, when I play the game, my Overlords always go in the exact same spot. Right? Like, obviously, maybe I shouldn't say that, but like my Overlord patterns don't really change much. Serral will change his Overlord patterns from game to game, from map to map. But also on the same map, when he plays an opponent multiple times, he changes up his Overlord positions. Meaning that it's very difficult for Classic to predict where that first OV is going to come from. So he tried to hide some of these structures. Serral immediately gets on top of it. He seems to be winning these little mind games as well. Follow-up scout here as well, just to see what's going on. A lot of additional gateways do go down though, but there's already a Templar Archives hiding in the corner of the main. And getting vision of that will give Serral a lot of information too. Overlord is moving on over in that direction. Stalkers though are working away at it. And I believe the Templar Archives will indeed be hidden for the time being. +1 melee here, together with a Baneling Nest. Similar to one of the previous games we've seen. Looks like the Oracles can't really quite get enough damage in. Okay. Storm. Super powerful. This really has been the key in every single one of the games that Classic has like looked comfortable in, right? Like this has been the absolute key in every single one of his strategies. Not even just in Protoss versus Zerg, by the way, for that matter. Also in Protoss versus Terran. This seems to be Classic's bread and butter. Like if he can get the Storm going, life is really good for him. Hydra then. Baneling speed. Good old Hydraling Bane. Skipping the Roach Warren this time around. Just going pure Hydraling Bane. +1 melee into +1 missile. A little bit strange. Already though, a 5th hatchery coming up all the way. At the 12 o'clock position here. Classic playing this very passively now. One of the issues here is that it's Meganatha, which is just a massive map. So him playing this more passive style makes a lot of sense. But again, if we're going to play a passive style, it may as well mean that we're going to go straight into late game. And if we're going straight into late game, well, you run into the problem again, where most Zerg players lose in the late game, but Serral is not one of them. Charge on the back it is here too for Classic. Zergling's already working away at the rocks. Serral, by the way, has been making non-stop army here for a while already, but he's doing it off of an economy of 87 workers. 87 drones basically means that he can go in for an attack and then just layer it on. Like, it's going to be extremely difficult, once the floodgates are open at the very least, to stop a 87 worker economy. Likewise, though, we see the same thing here for Classic, who's now also sitting at 87 probes. I don't know if Classic is going to be able to secure a 5th Nexus, though, as easily as Serral can take one. Obviously, that creep makes life so much better. Fleet Beacon, Stargate. Okay, Classic basically saying, yo, I am not going to be aggressive at all. If you want to dance, let's do exactly that. Overlord drops, though, are coming up. We have a Zergling balloon over on the right side and a Baneling balloon, I think. Wait. Oh, I thought that was going to be a Baneling balloon. On the left side. There you go. Overlord speed was a little bit late behind. All right, fair enough. Overlord number 1, Overlord number 2, and a mass amount of Banelings. Busting for $200,000. Ooh, there's a lot more balloons, actually. I mean, many Zerg players would bust for free. There's a lot of Banelings, though. 49 in total here in just a moment. Zergling drop going into the main base. Baneling drop, well, at the very least, hanging ominously right outside of the 3rd base's mineral line. Serral's got so many units, but Classic does have storms available, and that first storm is a good start. Second storm, I mean, in a stasis ward is a little risky. Here we go, though. Zergling drops in the meantime inside of the main base, too. Banelings are starting to hunt down as many of those Templar as possible. Good storms right there across the board. Nexus does live. What about the Zerglings, though? Right over here in the main base. Well, they are going to town. And in the meantime, Serral is carpet bombing the 3rd base, too. Even though the attack at the 4th has been held, 32 workers did still go down. And that is a problem here for Classic. In the meantime, the Zerg's economy has been pretty much entirely, well, just unhindered. It's just been mining away. 4th Nexus is gonna get sniped as well with a little hit squad of reinforcing Zerglings and Hydras. And this is definitely going to hamstring Classic. I mean, he can rebuild, right? It's still definitely possible for him to hang on. But at this point, we're no longer playing to win. We're playing to survive, which is not really a situation you want to be in. At this point, Classic's win condition is Serral overextending. And you know what? This might be one of them, although these are still obviously Zerglings. Zerglings and a bunch of Overlords. It's really not that expensive for Zerg to lose. In the meantime, we have the Banelings rolling into the 3rd base mineral line yet again. There are some probes hiding behind the mineral line too. At least they managed to escape, but the Nexus is not so lucky. And look at that. A Lurker Den coming up as well right here for Serral. Looking absolutely monstrous. Honestly, not skipping a beat this entire series. Okay, those storms are nice. Problem is, Classic is not in a position to replenish these lost units, and Serral doesn't need to trade even remotely efficiently anymore, although that may have been a little overly ambitious. Yeah. 90 probes, or 90 drones rather, versus only 53 probes. Serral's actually just gonna add on some more. Adrenal glands. Seismic spines. That's Lurker ranged and Zergling attack speed. Classic still hoping that maybe he can somehow, some way, though, defend this. And this is the type of Zerg unit composition that just rarely trades effectively. Again, though, this base over here on the left gets denied. And it's the classic 1-2 punch. Classic, in general, a little bit of a slower player. I mean, slow, obviously, with a little asterisk right next to it. He's sitting at only 350 APM. It's not slow. But compared to Serral, it is certainly on the slower end of things. Although, obviously, you always have to take the APM with a grain of salt with the way that, like, repeat rates and rapid fires and all the rest of it works out. But it is still a relative indication of speed. And Serral across the board in this entire series so far just seems to be a little bit sharper and a little bit faster. It's not much, but those are the margins that matter at the absolute highest level. As now he comes knocking again, but he's bringing lurkers to the party. No longer is it just Hydraling Bane. How in the world do you break this lurker? Well, I mean, you can try and come in from multiple angles, but I think maybe going in for the counterattack might be the better play. All that Serral really needs to do, though, is kill this army. Another Zergling counterattack here on the left. Classic no longer in a position to be able to split his forces, so that's another Nexus going down. Now the Lurkers and the Zerglings and the Hydras are closing the distance as well to the newly made 4th. 13 minutes into the game, Classic is soon going to be stuck on 2 bases. He's got 2 bases and a dream, though, and he can still sort of slither his army around the side here, maybe going for a counterattack, but if you're counterattacking, you're going to be fighting the army of the Zerg on creep. Serral still sitting at near 200 supply, leaving a bit of supply in the tank as well, just in case he wants to make more Lurkers. Lurkers, though, really desperately trying to get into the battle. It's a little bit awkward here, but as long as you're engaging off creep, there we go, a little bit of army hotkeying. As long as you're engaging on creep, that Protoss army is going to be difficult to win the game with. GG, well played, gets cold. And that indeed means that Serral is the 2025 World Champion of StarCraft 2 and the very first 3-time World Champion that we have ever had. I mean, I think he was already widely considered to be the greatest StarCraft 2 player of all time, but this really just seals the deal and really cements it. Look, 2018, believe it or not, is not 2 years ago. It's more than that. I know, that's crazy. But being this dominant in that long of a time frame is honestly quite ridiculous. And honestly, at this point, it really hasn't showed any sign of slowing down. Across the board, I think Zerg is weaker than it is, or than it used to be in 2018, but Serral always seems to figure it out, and word on the street has it as well that his Protoss and his Terran are excellent too. Actually, once upon a time, I always find this an interesting story. Once upon a time, there was a tournament in Finland. I think this was actually right after the World Cup in 2018. Serral decided to participate in the Finnish Nationals as Terran, and he won that entire tournament, not dropping a map as Terran. So not only is he the #1 Zerg from Finland, he's also the #1 Terran, which is kind of fun. But anyways, Serral now the 3-time World Champion of StarCraft 2. He's closing in on just a little under $2 million in tournament earnings. Obviously, that does not include anything like team salary, sponsorships, all the rest of it. It is a good time to be a StarCraft fan.